So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto become a god and get married with Elfen lied. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. It was cold out tonight. He shivered as a cloud of mist fell from his mouth into the air. He had his legs curled up into his chest, his arms holding them into place. He sighed. That was probably the 1000th time he'd sighed that night. He didn't feel like sleeping though because he was too sad. His golden tufts of hair covered his eyes. He couldn't simply blow them out of the way because of the beanie holding them in place. His whisker marks were filled with dirt due to a lack of showering. He wore an orange, beaten-up hoodie and a very beaten-up pair of pants. He didn't wear shoes because he didn't like not knowing what was underneath his feet. The nails on both his hands and feet were elongate, and pointed, and a tooth in his mouth pointed down and outward from his mouth. His name was Naruto. He stared at the wall opposite of him and blinked. He had been doing this for a while now, so he wasn't really all that bored. He was bored, but not as much as a kid his age should have been. A wave of wind went past his toes as they curled up to get closer to his body, in hopes of warming up. He needed to start moving or he would probably get too stiff to run if he needed to. He got up off of the floor and began to leave the alleyway. Maybe he could get a bite to eat at the local candy store. He liked anything sweet. He jumped into the air, easily clearing the two buildings making up the alleyway. He was now on the left one's roof. He looked down at the town below him. He didn't like this place in the slightest, but it was the best place to lay low. The police force here were just the right amount of stupid and the perfect amount of gullible that made it incredibly easy to hide. He walked to the other side of the roof and fell onto the streets. He made sure to land behind a garbage can so as to not cause anybody noticing. Not that he had to try very hard. Generally people were very stupid and didn't notice things. He liked that, not noticing, not knowing. Naruto began to walk through the crowds of people around him. They easily gave him a small girth because they didn't want to trip over him. He was only 15, but he wasn't very tall. He soon reached his destination and looked at the very raggedy candy shop. The owner wasn't very nice, but when Naruto wanted something from him, the old man had learned his lesson a while ago. He began to close in on the store, weaving through the people around him until he stopped. There was a girl standing at the front of the store. She was drooling slightly. She was about his age and height and she wore a black article of clothing that resembled a very cheap dress. She had a bag with a whole lot of money from what Naruto could see. She's going to raid the whole goddamn store. Naruto thought angrily. "Excuse me sir," she said softly. His hearing was very sensitive so he had little trouble listening in on their conversation. "What can I help you with?" He halted his sentence when he turned around. The girl was dirty and her clothes were worn. He probably didn't have anything on her. "What do I want?" the man asked. "There goes all the snacks." Naruto thought to himself. He was really looking forward to some cotton candy. He would probably do anything. A light bulb went over his head. When she buys everything, just like every other little kid does, I'll snatch something off of her. She won't ever know. Naruto thought happily. "Can I have some?" the girl asked. Her voice was incredibly innocent. Naruto smiled at that. It was very hard to find people that were innocent, but nobody ever truly was. That was the cruel joke of life. Nobody was innocent. Not him, not the shopkeeper, not even whoever the hell's idea it was to make this world. He or she was the least innocent of all in his opinion. If he ever did find someone who was innocent however, he would follow that person wherever they went. Anybody who could retain it was perfect in his books. 500 yen, the man said, holding out his hand. The girl looked down at the ground. She seemed very sad at that moment. Why didn't she simply give the man the money? Two older women bumped the young girl out of line and ordered their food. The shopkeeper smiled at them as they ordered their food. They both gave him some coins and were off. "You can order your food now," Naruto thought, hoping the girl would pick up on his thought patterns or something. The girl sniffled, turned and left. Naruto's eyes widened. He felt his heart ache. It wasn't a new feeling, but it was an uncommon one. Naruto's eyes hardened as he walked up to the shopkeeper. "Hey little girl," Naruto shouted at her. The girl stopped in her tracks and turned to see Naruto. He gave her a smile and walked up to the counter. "Hey asshole," Naruto shouted. The man turned around, infuriation etched into his face. This look soon turned into fear. Naruto-san. Wah, what can I do for you?" he asked. "Hey girl, come over here for a second." She did as she was asked. She stood next to him. Naruto got a better look at her. She was cute. She had short pink hair and her arms and legs seemed unscarred. But by the way she walked over to him, he could tell that something was up. The weirdest part about her was the horns sticking out from her head. They looked somewhat like white, Neko ears. But Naruto could tell that was just the light giving off that illusion. He knew bone when he saw it. He wouldn't point it out however. He would never do something like that. "What's your name?" Naruto asked. The girl was almost the exact same height as him, so he had little difficulty looking her directly in the eyes. "Nana," she told him. Naruto felt his heart flutter for a moment, but swallowed this weird feeling and turned toward the shopkeeper. "What do you wanna eat, Nana-chan?" Naruto asked. The shopkeeper began to shiver. A dirty, hungry, little girl would completely demolish his stock and there was nothing he could do. Nobody crossed Naruto on this side of town, no matter what. I don't know," she stuttered sadly. The shopkeeper wiped his head happily. He avoided that one. She would never be able to make up her mind. No little girl could, no matter what. "Well, if you don't know what you want." Naruto turned his head from Nana to the shopkeeper. "Then she'll just have one of everything," Naruto said darkly. The shopkeeper gulped. How will she be able to hold everything?" he asked, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he would be able to avoid giving her most of his merchandise. "Well, get a bag, idiot," Naruto shouted. He rushed into the back of his mobile shop and rummaged for a bag. He soon found one. He came out for Naruto and Nana to see and gulped again. Naruto was staring at the claws on his hand. He knew what that boy could do with those. Naruto's foot was tapping on the ground impatiently. He also knew what the boy could do with that. He didn't like remembering. "Hurry up, idiot. I don't have all day," Naruto said. The shopkeeper frantically knocked everything off of the counters. Into the bag. He didn't care how or what went into the damn thing. He just wanted this to be done. Nana watched with astonishment. She didn't understand how the boy had so much power over the shopkeeper. She in all honesty didn't really care, she was just hungry. "Here," the shopkeeper said loudly. He held the bag full of snacks and treats forward. Naruto looked at it a moment, then took it from the much older man's hand. He took it as if it weighed nothing at all. He inspected the contents for a moment and then smiled. That old bastard may have been an ass, but his candy was always top-notch. "Here, Nana-chan," Naruto said, handing the bag to the young girl. "Anyo, thank you," she said. They stood in front of each other, awkwardly. Naruto smiled and turned away. He gazed at the shivering shopkeeper from his position in the street. His eyes SL. He smiled at the man, showing his very well-defined canines. "Wait," the girl shouted from behind him. He turned, his mouth shut and his eyes reverted back to normal. "Yeah, Nana-chan?" Naruto asked. "Well," she looked down on the floor. Blushing, Naruto scratched behind his head. People went by, not even bothering to pay any attention to their background. Naruto didn't understand how people could go by, not even listening. They weren't scared until there was an immediate threat to their lives. It was a good feeling, not having to worry. Worry-warts never get to enjoy life. Unfortunately, worry-warts also lived longer. There was no easy medium. "Do you have any place to stay?" Naruto asked. "Well," she replied with the same statement as before. Naruto smiled. Maybe he wouldn't be so bored of being alone for a while. "Me neither. I know the perfect spot." "Come on," Naruto said, grabbing her arm. He felt a pop radiate through the fake-feeling arm. He turned toward Nana to see he popped her arm off. His eyes widened. "I knew there was something up. Can't get anything past me," Naruto thought. "Sorry, sometimes when I'm not paying attention, that happens," Nana explained. "Don't worry about it," Naruto said, not knowing how to respond to this situation. He gave her the arm back and she popped it back into place. He noticed that something almost invisible had grabbed hold of it. How queer. It was as if a ghost was controlling it. Now that he noticed, outlines of ghost-like hands seemed to be holding all of her arms and legs in place, moving them as if they were puppets. That's not what you see on your average person, Naruto thought. He didn't have any special abilities pertaining to his sight, but he was incredibly aware. Everything had mass, no matter what. He could see the movement in the air and the fact that it took up space. He would have to figure out how these hands worked. Well, follow me then, Naruto said cheerfully. Naruto once again dragged her by her arm and took off. She was surprised by the speed in which Naruto was going. They weaved through crowds of unsuspecting people. Soon they reached an alleyway in which Naruto was very familiar with. Here, this is where I stay, Naruto said happily. He looked at the state of his makeshift home, which was made up of 2 walls of bricks and a garbage can in the back. It was home. I love it, she said happily. Naruto smiled. He really took his time keeping the place clean, from chasing off the rats to fighting other homeless bums. This place cost him a lot of theoretical war scars. Something strong filled the air. He looked over to Nana, who didn't seem to notice. She was eyeing her candy greedily. Naruto took a swift sniff of the air. It smelled like sushi. Hey Nana-chan, I've gotta go check on something for a sec. I'll be back quick, Naruto said, feigning happiness. She looked at him, sadness a little evident in her eyes. She nodded her head. You can eat the candy whenever you like. It's yours, Naruto shouted. He ran around the corner out of view. He jumped up high into the sky and landed onto a building. He looked around, expecting to see something. Yo Naruto. Naruto's head craned to see behind him. A very tall and muscular black man with blonde hair on his head and face looked at him. He towered over the very small Naruto. He wore goggles over his eyes and was covered in scars and tattoos. He wore a wife beater and a pair sagging jeans. Killer Bee, Naruto said, a little venom in his voice. Things are moving son. Niggas is getting armed. They gonna find us soon son. Killer Bee said. He was clearly very influenced by Western rap culture. His voice was very gruff and he didn't seem to be the kind of guy that joked around. They'll find you. If you've forgotten, nobody can catch me. Unlike you idiots that always do something stupid. I'm always low. I don't use my powers for shit, Naruto said angrily. You gonna get angry sometime. Then, they'll sense ya. Just know if they do, and you do get pissed son, you ain't alone. No matter how much you hate the rest of us Jinchuriki. I don't hate any of you. You're all just stupid, Naruto said mockingly. A tick mark formed on the large mon's head. Whatever dog, I'm out. You know where to find me young blood. Killer Bee said, vanishing instantly. Naruto sighed. Why was life so hard? Little did he realize that things would get a whole lot harder from here on out. Where did she go? That was the thought that was going through Naruto's mind at the time. Nana had just disappeared on him, without warning. Did she just leave me? Naruto thought. He frowned. She probably did. Now he was alone again. He should have expected this. You can't trust a dirty ape. They're very unreliable. He dropped down to where she was originally. She had started a fire earlier as far as he could tell. He checked the debris. Money. Naruto shouted. She was burning money. Who does that? He even knew better and he'd only understood the concept for about a year. I hate girls, Naruto said through clenched teeth. He took a good sniff of the air. He would probably have to find her by scent. He was a pretty kick-ass tracker if you asked him. Why would you search for her when she left you? Leave her to suffer in this world on her lonesome. A dark thought entered his head. He shook it from his head. He placed his face to the floor and took a deep sniff of the ground. She had clearly left the alley with someone else. By the smell of it, neither were very clean. He began to crawl on all fours and follow the trail. He was now out of the alleyway. It smelled a lot thicker around this particular area of town. Everyone smelt like something. The smell of soap and detergent used to make his nose burn with incredible pain. Now it was a mild irritation. He scratched his head and walked around town, hoping to find the trail again. Give up. You won't find them, so why try? Naruto thought it over. Have you seen this girl? A man asked. Naruto turned around to see a police officer holding out a picture to a girl of about 25. No, officer. I'm sorry. She apologized. The officer nodded and left. He was an older man with his hair graying and wrinkles beginning to form on his face. He looked like he had been doing this for a while. He had a partner who was much younger. He looked wet behind the ears. Naruto could tell by the expression on his face. It read anger. He was clearly beginning to get tired and annoyed by his assignment. Naruto began to move in closer to the officers and try and get a look at the picture. He weaved through people and hid every time the officers began to feel suspicious. It was a fun game. He had completely forgotten what he was doing earlier. Right now he was playing ninja. They asked a couple more people if they saw the girl. Naruto moved in closer on the last one to see the picture. Who the hell gets lost in such a cramped place like here? He was able to catch a glimpse of it. The girl had pink, short hair and a black worn-out dress. On her head were 2 horns. 2 horns. Naruto went cold. His eyes slitted and he felt his teeth harden. Every bone in his body at that moment had become thicker. The claws on his hands and feet felt 1,000 times sharper. They're going to kill Nana. Kill them first. Single quote. Calm down, Naruto. You don't know what they want her for. Maybe she ran away. Yeah, that's it. Naruto thought to himself. His features began to revert back to normal. He walked up to the officers. Excuse me, officers, Naruto asked. They gave him his attention. The younger one looked quite mad and the other read calmness about him that made Naruto feel better. Yes, kid, the older one asked. I think I've seen the girl in that picture. Naruto told them. Their eyes widened. Finally a lead. Can you tell us where? The younger one asked impatiently. Naruto looked around, as if nervous. Can we go over to the restrooms? It's a secret, Naruto said innocently. Kid, sure thing. The older man interrupted. Naruto smiled. He led them over. Tot had a couple stalls and a few latrines. It was pretty well kept. They were the only ones in there. So tell us about this girl. The older one said. Naruto walked by them and headed over to the door and locked it. I don't want anyone to hear cause it's a secret, Naruto said. A tick mark appeared on the younger officer's forehead. He hated kids more than anything. If it weren't for his partner, he would have just beat the crap out of people and got what he wanted to hear. That's how they did it in the movies. Sure thing, kid. Now tell us what you know. The older man said. Why are you looking for her? Naruto asked, as innocently as he could. Her family is looking for her. The old man told him. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He lied to you. Single quote. Naruto's eyes went red. The transition of color went unnoticed because of his bangs covering his eyes. He stood there for a moment. What were they really after? Tell us what you know, brat. The younger one said. He put his arm on Naruto's with a little force. Nobody expected what would happen next. Naruto grabbed the man's hand and lifted it off of his arm and twisted it. The officer felt incredible pain that was caused by the very audible snap that resonated from his arm. Ah! He screamed. Naruto threw him into a wall. The older officer pulled out his gun and pointed it at the boy in front of him. Freeze, the man said. He looked over to his partner who had lost consciousness. He then turned back to the blonde kid. The boy had disappeared. Where the hell did he go? The officer thought aloud. He felt a hand wrap around his wrist. The boy had grabbed it. His grip was strong. What do you want with Nana? The boy asked. Before the officer could reply, he felt his arm lose feeling. Blood squirted everywhere as he lost his shooting arm. The speed was incredible. He didn't even see him lose his own arm. He just felt it go. He should have been dragged with his arm instead, but the speed in which he pulled didn't cause him to falter in the slightest. Ah! He screamed. Naruto kicked him onto the ground. He grabbed the cop by his hair and dragged the thrashing man to one of the stalls. The man attempted to stop the boy, but he wasn't strong enough and he had lost a lot of blood. Naruto brought the man to his knees. Tell me the truth. No response. Naruto dunked the man's head into the toilet. The officer thrashed violently as he blew bubbles to the top of the toilet. Naruto brought him back up for air. The officer breathed in heavily. Then out. Why do you want her? Naruto screamed. His question was met with more panting. He slammed the man's head back into the toilet and repeated the process. The man squirted blood from his wound onto the toilet wall as he fought Naruto's grip. He failed. Naruto pulled him up again. One more chance. Fuck you, the man said uncharacteristically. Naruto thought he was a nice guy. Poor guy, he just wouldn't quit. You got a family? Naruto asked. The man didn't answer. That always meant yes. Just tell me and you can go see them. Naruto said. The man just stared at the toilet. Some of his blood had spilled into the water and caused it to look murky with red clouds floating around in it. They looked so beautiful. He'd never seen red clouds until today. They really were beautiful. On any other day it would just seem odd. It must have been because he was so very close to dying. It just made them look so much more beautiful. He hoped they had red clouds in heaven. Naruto placed his hands on either side of the man's head. With a quick jerk, the man fell into the toilet, dead. He took the officer's gun and walked over to where the other one laid. He was still unconscious. Naruto pointed the gun at the man's head and pulled the trigger. Blood splattered everywhere. Naruto kicked the man onto the floor. He unlocked the door and walked through it. He closed it after dropping the gun in a garbage can. His eyes went back to their normal blue and he walked over to another garbage can. He then threw up. Barf fell out of his stomach and into the can. He coughed, trying to get the rest of it out of his system. Another stream of puke flew from his mouth and into the garbage. He wiped the nastiness from his lips and continued onward. He heard a scream from behind him. He didn't turn to greet it. Someone had found them. He wasn't going to worry about it. He had to go find Nana. He found another alleyway. It was time to look by rooftop. He jumped high into the air and began to search roof by roof. He didn't know why he needed to find her. He just did. Why does he search so strongly? He's only just met the girl. A man said. He was in a cave. Televisions littered the walls of the cave and they all had different angles of Naruto on them. Naruto was jumping from roof to roof as if he was born to do this act. I created each Jinchuriki differently based on the deity in which I gained inspiration in creating them from. A man said in the shadows. The other man looked into the shadows. He had glasses and silver hair. He pushed the large circular spectacles to the back of his nose on habit. The man in the shadows could not be seen. My first Jinchuriki was the four-tailed ape. He may be an old man now living a very pleasant life. But he is unruly. He is territorial and violent. The man in the shadows explained. The one-tailed Shukaku is based on insanity. He doesn't sleep, so neither does the Jinchuriki. He continued. Slitted eyes formed from the shadows. They were green and soulless. A kind of coldness filled the room that made the man in the open shiver. The nine-tailed fox is incredibly angry and territorial. He's clever, clingy and very powerful. It's interesting to study the behavioral pattern of my little Jinchuriki from time to time. They're not like my other experiments. The man said. Nine for some reason likes to build relationships. That is where you see the contrast in between him and the nine tails. But that's where the differences stop. His voice was slimy. He acts on instinct most of the time and is very hard to keep contained. How do you think all my other creations escaped? The man asked. Of course Orochimaru-sama. The man stepped out of the shadows. He had long black hair and pale skin. He was tall and let off an aura of power that dared anyone in the vicinity to try something, and yet at the same time, told them if the attempt was made, they would die. We'll recapture them, Kabuto-kun. I can assure you, I've got something special for all of them. Naruto began to pick up the scent again. It was getting strong again. His pace quickened as he felt the muscles in his legs tighten. He was a blur on the roofs now. Once he found her, he would probably just go home after finding her happily with her family. He just had to know she was safe. He reached a tall building that reminded him of some kind of restaurant. It must have been pretty popular because it was right next to the beach. Who the hell could pass up on a good meal, then hanging out at the beach? Kamakura wasn't his favorite place in the world, but it was one of the only places he could think of that didn't remind him of his past. Until now, he smelt a very familiar scent in the restaurant and he didn't like it. He didn't hate any of his fellow escapees, but he also didn't like sharing space. They shouldn't either. He went up to the front door. Slowly he slid it open and looked. Inside, nobody home, he guessed. It smelled so familiar though. Like electricity and dried blood. It wasn't the kind of blood that you would get from just killing someone. It was the kind when something had soaked in it. It smelled old however, like it hadn't been properly washed in years. He slowly wandered through the house. Soon he had reached the other side of the house. It wasn't a restaurant. That assumption had been thrown out of the window when he noticed that the whole place had little of nothing to do with the culinary arts. Every step he took made a slight noise on the very thin floorboard. It made him feel uncomfortable. He may be kind of loudrise. He found the backyard, only to see Nana standing right in front of what looked like her older sister. She had Annette, her girl, standing next to her that seemed her age. Nana-chan. Found ya. All heads were now on Naruto. He smiled sheepishly, feeling a little embarrassed. Naruto, run! Nana shouted. Her fake arm was removed by what looked like one of those invisible hand things she had. Only problem was it wasn't hers. It was that other older girl's. Her arm popped off as Nana and the other little girl took a step back. Naruto saw a shift in the air next to him. He ducked and jumped over another shift. The older girl's eyes widened. He dodged them. How had he seen them? Naruto was now gone. He just disappeared. The older girl looked around, only to find Naruto to her side. Take this, Naruto shouted. He went to punch her but one of her vectors reacted and knocked him into a wall. Naruto, Nana shouted, going to him. He was up against the wall. Those goddamn hand thing was hard to get around. When they went to hit his limbs, they vibrated, making them easier to see. They were harder to see when were just grabbing things like himself. He couldn't tell they were there when they weren't moving. Don't worry Nana-chan, I've got this, Naruto said, getting up. Stop it, the other little girl shouted. The two horned girls looked at her, while Naruto kept his eyes trained on the older girl's hands. Mayu, Nana uttered. So that's her name. What about the older girls? Naruto thought to himself. Stop it NYU. Mayu shouted. What's with those hand things, NYU? Naruto said, quoting her name. Sounded like a stupid name. It was like some idiot had thought of it on the spot. He would they called her something more akin to how she looked, like Horn Girl, or Ghost Hands. Something cool like that. That's not her name. It's Lucy, Nana said through clenched teeth. Now that was dumb. It had absolutely no ring to it whatsoever. Lucy. That wasn't even the same language. Get back, Nana said. Her hands began to move more erratically, making it easier for Naruto to see. How did you see my vectors? Lucy asked. So that's what you all those hand things. Alrighty then, let's go, Naruto said. His eyes slitted and his claws began to elongate. The room began to heat up and all of the inhabitants began to sweat. Naruto's teeth began to show thicker and the whisker marks on his cheeks darkened. A vector came at Naruto, only for it to stop in Naruto's grip. Lucy's eyes widened. How? Don't worry about it, Naruto said. Lucy clutched her head. She was forgetting again. She fell to the ground, clutching her head. She then passed out. What the hell? Naruto said aloud. NYU. A boy came busting into the door. Naruto knew there was something weird about this goddamn house, and he knew something smelt awfully familiar. Koutra, Mayu shouted. Naruto looked at Nana, to see how uncomfortable he looked. What happened to NYU-chan? And he looked over to Naruto. Kyuubi, Anbu-san. Naruto looked up at the slightly taller boy. His red-slitted eyes attempted to will him dead. Maybe if he stared hard enough, the bastard would die. He didn't like him in the slightest. Koutra looked back. All emotion had left his face. Can you guys go inside for a moment? Take NYU-chan with you please. He asked. But Koutra, now Yuka, you too Nana, Koutra said. There was about to be a retort until the air around them began to turn cold. Yuka picked NYU up and motioned for the other girls to follow suit. They did so. Slinking into the house, Nana took one look back at the boy she barely knew. She then went inside. The two boys still outside heard the door close and lock. What are you doing here Kyuubi? That's not my name, Naruto said angrily. They stared down at each other for another moment. Koutra wasn't going to get any information until he gave in and called him by what he wanted to be called. It hurt his pride however to show weakness. What are you doing here, Naruto? He put emphasis on his name. I should be asking you the same question, Anbu-chan. Naruto said cheekily. Koutra looked at the hypocritical boy in front of him. He wouldn't give the boy another opportunity to feel snarky and secure. He wouldn't let some stupid nickname give the Jinchuriki control over him. I live here, Koutra said simply. Naruto's sweat dropped. He honestly should have known that from the moment he entered the building, but he wasn't thinking straight. What are you doing here, Jinchuriki? He hissed. Naruto snarled at the boy who was now taking a knife out of his back pocket. I'm here for Nana, Naruto said through clenched teeth. Koutra got into a defensive stance while Naruto got onto all fours. Any more tension and it would be very likely that one of them would die. What is she to you? Koutra asked. Naruto glared at the older boy in front of him. Stupid you always thought they were better than everyone else. If he wasn't highly skilled, Naruto would have already killed him by now. It took tactics to take out an Anbu. Just a friend. So back up. Naruto took a step forward, hoping to bluff out Koutra. Koutra held his ground. He knew exactly how Jinchuriki worked in a fight. When faced up against tough odds, they would try and scare the enemy in hopes of avoiding a fight. They were animals. Koutra knew how to deal with animals. That girl living with you is pretty dangerous, Naruto said off topic. Koutra quirked an eyebrow. The mood seemed to change almost immediately as he went to a chair on the porch and sat at it, but still not taking his eyes off of the blonde Jinchuriki. Couldn't trust M for nothing. Who? It sounded more like a demand when it came out of Koutra's mouth. Naruto smiled. Being under an Anbu's skin was always fun. Nyu-chan, Naruto said simply. His grin was violent and uncaring. Koutra's eyes hardened. He got up out of his chair and disappeared. In an instant, he had a knife to Naruto's neck. Naruto felt sweat drop down his forehead. He didn't care though, he was still smiling. You've become twisted, evil even, Koutra said. Naruto could feel the anger roll off of the boy. Naruto swiped the blade away from his neck and tackled Koutra onto the floor. Koutra struggled under the strong grip of the Jinchuriki. He butted the blonde off of him and got back up onto the floor. He held his fingers to his mouth. Fireball, he shouted. A human-sized fireball flew out of his mouth and hit Naruto directly, knocking him back down onto the ground. The Jinchuriki attempted to get up, but Koutra kicked him back down and held the blade to his neck once again. They looked at each other for another moment. Naruto's smile had all but disappeared. Kill me, Naruto said. The look in his eyes made him look very serious. Selfish. What? The blade fell away from his neck and went back into Koutra's pocket. You think you're the only one who matters? You think you can just let death take you? Koutra asked. This way of thinking and this false form of peace has made you foolish and thoughtless. If I kill you, someone will kill me, Koutra said. Naruto looked at him. He had heard this from someone before. This hatred is what binds us together and it links us in this world of pain. I will not join this chain. Who told you that baloney? You did, Koutra said. Naruto's eyes widened. Had he said that before? He couldn't remember. His times in the cells were like a blur of pain and loneliness. He used to be an idealist. Now he was unsure. Koutra turned to leave. He was done. He made his point. He shifted his head to look at Naruto in his peripherals. Naruto was leaving. Why don't you stay for a while? I've already got most of the town living here anyways, Koutra said happily. What? Naruto said, pausing. Yeah, why not? Koutra said, thinking over his little bit of generosity. But I tried to kill you. Naruto said, I've had so many attempts at my life, it isn't even something to worry about anymore. Koutra said happily. Why not? Sure, he was a Jinchuriki and if he released all of his powers, he would probably destroy it. Who cared? He would die even if Naruto wasn't in his house when control over his powers was lost. On the other hand, Jinchuriki were violent by nature. He'd seen them beat people in half and the more bloodthirsty ones would actually eat them. Naruto might have been different back when he was younger, but he had become jaded. Well, Koutra was never known for making good decisions. Come on, let's let bygones be bygones, Koutra said happily. Naruto looked hesitantly at the boy in front of him. Nobody liked Anbu back in the day. They were basically the top man's lapdog. But they were just as imprisoned as the rest of them. They just got more leeway. He wondered if he could trust him. He nodded his head eventually and followed the older boy inside. He didn't feel comfortable with the situation. But there wasn't much he could do about it. It was either live with the Anbu or go back onto the streets. Maybe it was time to live a little. My, how interesting that Koutra-kun would allow a Jinchuriki into his home. Orochimaru giggled. It was so interesting. It was like releasing a bunch of wild animals into the city and seeing how they reacted to the world around them. Jinchuriki, in a sense, were basically wild animals. They were like zoo animals. Zoo animals didn't dream about running out in the prairie and lying in the sweat-green grass of freedom. They didn't have imaginations, so they couldn't dream of the wild. Even if they could, they still wouldn't want to leave. Animals were against change. They were like American Republicans. They didn't feel like changing the values they were born and raised on. Why should they if it worked? When a lion is inside of its exhibit, they will generally lie around and do things that most zoo lions do: eat, sleep, drink. Now if one was to move something inside of the enclosure, like moving a tire or changing the spot where the beast gets his drink, the lion will not react well. It will most likely stop eating and become hostile. All those years of adaptation has made it very hard for them to adapt. So hard to change. They are perfectly capable, but it requires a great deal of effort. If they were in an environment where things are never in a state of constant, the animal would most likely die of shock. That was what was so special about Jinchuriki. They were animals by heart, but their human features were only there for what humans were best at: adaptation. The average human environment is always in a constant state of change. They will move things around on a whim and rid themselves of things they don't enjoy. That was one of the few reasons why Orochimaru integrated them into his experiments. Humans were weak by nature, and if Orochimaru had just wanted something to use for the sole purpose of destruction, then humans wouldn't have made it onto the lab tables. But they could change, think rationally and react to other things like nothing he could describe in the animal kingdom. But at heart his Jinchuriki were still animal. They weren't advanced enough to take on the name of human and couldn't be placed in the subspecies of man. They were too aggressive and very easily snapped. They still had the ability to adapt like humans, just not to the same extent. Some had little to no ability to do so, like the one-tailed Shukaku, while others were incredibly efficient like the eight-tailed Hachibi. They varied generally. He would enjoy watching them further, but he would prefer them back in their enclosures. That's where they belonged, in the cages in which they were birthed and raised. He smiled heavily, allowing for his teeth to sparkle in what little light could be seen inside of the cave. Itachi, the snake man, barked. A man with black hair and deep dark pools for eyes dropped down from his spot on the roof and onto the ground. "Hi Orochimaru-sama," Itachi asked. "I think it's time to put our plan into motion. I want those things back." "Hi," Itachi said back, disappearing in a flurry of crows. "Time to see how you react, Jinchuriki." Naruto stared at the item in front of him. It looked like a circle with a hole in it. Why would someone put a hole in a circle? Food soon found itself in the said item. Naruto scratched his head. So it held food. Wasn't that what the ground was for? Eat up, Naruto and Nana. You're guests and we don't want to make our guests hunger. Yuka said happily. Everyone dug in immediately, except for Naruto. He looked at the food in front of him. He took a sniff, realizing it wasn't any kind of candy he'd ever smelt before. It smelt like trees. Did they want him to eat trees? "Are you not hungry, Naruto?" Koutra asked. NYU yelled. Koutra's sweat dropped. "What is it?" Naruto asked. "Vegetables," Yuka said happily. "Well, there's always room for free food." Naruto then began stuffing his face with said vegetables. His face then turned green, prompting for everyone to stop eating and look at him. He was holding his barf in quite well. Soon he would spew, however. "NYU. Here, I've got an idea," Koutra said, rushing into the kitchen. He began to stumble over pots and pans until he came back into the room with a steamy bowl of noodles. "Here, I think you would do better with ramen," Koutra said. Naruto wolfed the food down, relishing in one of the most delicious things he had ever tasted. "That, my friend, is ramen," Koutra said happily. Itachi sat in the upper corner of the room that looked like a laboratory. No human could ever hope to see him, no matter how hard they looked. It was also his least favorite thing in this pitiful world. He didn't hate the darkness because it was in the darkness in which he was raised. If you ask me, she has a very good shot at defeating Lucy. A man spoke from underneath him. Itachi watched closely. Then again, every instinct she has tells her to kill human beings. How do you plan to make her cooperate? The man asked. Itachi looked at the girl next to him. He wore glasses, and if what Orochimaru-sama had told him was true, she was a Japanese spy by the name of Shirakawa. After all, it is almost impossible to restrain her. The man pushed his glasses up onto his face, looking down. Uninterested. Or perhaps you feel that you can appeal to her emotions. Thanks for waiting. Came a new voice. The two down below turned their heads behind them to look at the approaching woman. Her footsteps were loud yet light. Itachi felt something in his stomach. This mission wouldn't turn out as smooth as he would like, and he knew it. You must be. Yes, I'm Saito, but she calls me Mom. The woman said happily. Her head tilted to the side as Itachi stared at the two locks of hair behind her head. Having hair that long was stupid in his opinion. It could cost a life. Chief Kurama walked down the beach. He needed to find Bando. Why wasn't he on the beach? Hey young blood. Kurama turned around. There stood on the beach a very tall and muscular black man with blonde hair and black goggles. Hiding his eyes. What you doin' in this here beach, my nigga? The black man asked. He talked with a very uneducated voice which was gruff and scratchy. Do you know where I may find Bando? Kurama asked. The black man smiled. Dat guy, he ain't comin' to dis beach again. The black man said. He took a step forward, making Kurama take two backward. The scientist pulled a gun from his pocket and pointed it at the black man. Who are you? Kurama asked. Rather than tremble in fear of the gun being pointed at him, the black man smiled. The name's Killer B. Killer B said happily. That gun of yours is gonna have to go on da go. I'ma be the one to knock it on da flow. Killer B exclaimed. Before Chief Kurama could react, Killer B had disappeared. His gun fell apart onto the ground into two even pieces. Kurama's eyes widened. Let me ask dat shit again. Killer B said, behind Chief Kurama now. The scientist felt sweat roll down his forehead. There was no way his eyes could have picked up the speed in which Killer B moved. What was he, Dafuk, you doin' on this here beach? Killer B asked again. I was looking for Bando. Kurama said. Poorly. Killer B said happily, reappearing in front of Kurama, making the poor man jump and fall onto his butt. Do you know where I can find him? Kurama asked. Why, I can do what he can do, ya see. Nobody can stop Killer B. Killer B exclaimed happily. I don't think you would be suited for this kind of assignment. Kurama said. After seeing what the man was capable of, he was sure that if given a little time, he would be able to beat Lucy. But he didn't want to drag anyone into his mess if he didn't have to. Try me. There's nothing in her vitals to prevent us from doing it. But I doubt she will be able to stand on her own. Saito said, looking at the chart while inside of the observation room. She closed the chart and looked at the two other people from earlier, in front of her. You do realize that we've kept her inside of that observation chamber ever since she was born? She said. Are you really going to let her out? She asked. Itachi smiled at the girl. Maybe this whole mission could be avoided if they didn't let the thing out. He then frowned. It was going to happen whether they wanted it or not. That's right, Shirakawa said. As long as number 35 has been here. Saito has worked with her, but that doesn't mean. I think she'll listen to me. We talk through the speakers every day. Saito interrupted the male scientist. She looked back at the containment unit in which they were using to hold number 35. These people were monsters, yet they were a brighter evil than what he had known. These Dicloni were kept and studied because of fear of extinction. There was reasoning behind the madness. Itachi never had the luxury of being contained with reason. I'm the only voice she really knows. She calls me Mom. It's strange, isn't it? Every girl needs a mommy. Hee hee. I've never seen her face before, so it's like meeting my long-lost daughter. She said happily. I bet she'll recognize me if she sees me. Get ready, Shirakawa told her. Sure. She left the room and headed over to the giant dome of a cage. So you really think that she can persuade number 35? The male scientist asked. Even if she is the strongest Diclinus. Number 35 is just a child. As far as she knows, Saito is her parent. Her only human contact. Number 35 won't do anything to tear them apart. In theory, but is there any evidence to prove that she will listen? If kindness doesn't work, I'm sure threats will. Threats. Soon after she was born, number 35 went into surgery and bombs were implanted into her body. A bomb. A bomb. I was uninformed of this. Itachi thought to himself. He kept his face emotionless as he reeled through contingency plans. Why wasn't I told? Isn't that a little drastic? Perhaps at the time it was drastic, but it's useful now. Shirakawa told the man, if number 35 doesn't listen to Saito, we'll detonate the bomb and kill her. I'm releasing the partitions, a scientist said. The room was filled with buzzing and warning lights. It allowed for Itachi to be seen, but nobody's eyes were on him. They were all on the opening door. Water spilled out of the darkness. Mariko, come here. Don't be scared, Saito said happily. It's okay, Sweaty, you can come out now. That's when Itachi saw it. A small hand, reaching around the corner. Something tugged on his heart. Until he squashed the feeling. He wouldn't become weak. A small naked girl with bandage wrapped around her face, stumbled out of the darkness. She was no older than 8 from what Itachi could tell. She was emaciated and weak. She breathed heavily under the strain of moving. Her hair stuck out of the bandaging. It was long and pink, just like every other female Dicloni. This is. The girl walked forward, stepping in the puddle of water on the floor. She couldn't see, but she was going to move, no matter what. She had a tube connected to her body. That was how they fed her. Good, Saito said happily, holding out her arms so that when the girl reached her, she would be embraced. The tube popped off of Mariko as the small girl fell onto the floor. Saito rushed to the fallen girl and sat on the ground in worry. She held the girl in his arms. You think it's safe to let her get that close? She was given the warning. The bomb can be set off. A scientist in the observation room held his finger over the detonation button, ready for anything to go wrong. You poor thing, Saito told Mariko. You're so thin. Saito began to unwrap her bandages. She seemed confused when she saw Saito, but too tired to do anything. Do you know who I am, Mariko? Saito asked, with tears in her eyes. Mommy. Her voice was soft yet weak. Saito felt happy. This was her daughter. She had finally gotten to meet her angel. No, you're not. Saito's eyes widened as she felt herself being torn in half. Her intestines came flying out of her stomach as her body was separated in two. Blood splattered against the walls as Shirakawa and the other scientist took a step back in fear. Shirakawa. Mariko shakily got up off of the floor. Everything began to get cold as the little girl's bloodlust filled the air. Shirakawa turned toward the observation deck. Detonate the bomb, she yelled. The scientist was about to do so, but was stopped by Saito's upper body being thrown into the room through the window, knocking the man out. I knew this was going to go wrong, the male scientist said shakily. He ran over to the red last resort button on the wall and slammed it. Alarms filled the building, but then they stopped. What? The male scientist asked, only to find himself unable to breathe. He looked down to see a knife protruding out of his neck as he fell to the floor with a thud. The observation deck caught on fire. It was black fire, roasting anyone in there. Shirakawa was frozen. She didn't know what to do. How was this Dicloni able to do this? Hello, Mariko-san, a man said, standing right next to Shirakawa. It was Itachi. His eyes had turned blood red and his face held no emotion. Who are you, mister? Do you wanna play? Mariko asked innocently. Her vectors sped toward the two, only for Itachi to disappear before her eyes. His hand was now around the little girl's neck. He held her there off of the ground as she struggled to fight back. She sent her vectors toward Itachi, only to find her whole world filled with darkness. Itachi dropped the small girl on the ground and turned toward Shirakawa. His red eyes, that reminded her of a windmill, began to spin. Who are you? She yelled. Taking a step back, she tripped on the blood on the floor and fell onto her butt. Itachi began to walk toward her. Freeze. Men with guns began to fill the room. "Put your hands up or we will shoot," one of them yelled. Itachi looked at them for a while. He could only allow the scientist to live. "I'm sorry for what I have to do now," Itachi told them. Amaterasu. They were all engulfed in black flames. Screams resonated through the room as Shirakawa looked in horror as everyone died. Their guns had melted on contact as the black flames consumed them. "Make sure Mariko fights Lucy," Itachi told her. "Threaten her with bombs. They have been disabled, but they can still be threatened," Itachi said, disappearing. He left her in the cold dark room with a numb of dead burning guards and an unconscious Mariko. "So you wanna let me kill some little trick to save some other little trick?" Killer Bee asked. "Well, in that sense, I would like you to kill Mariko so to let Nana live. But they both yo family," Killer Bee said, scratching his head. "Sometimes we must make sacrifices for the good of others. And sometimes we gotta just say no," Killer Bee said. "What? I knew dis one kid. Back when I was younger like. He ain't like how he was then, but he thought if y'all got something close, you should hold on to it with everything. He said if y'all got a family, y'all should hold on and love 'em. No matter what," Killer Bee lectured. Kurama looked at the boy in front of him. "He's da only reason why I'm out. I like to th den. He was a tough shit, and he didn't care no how what a nigga thought." Killer Bee told the man in front of him. "I'll stop dis little girl, but I ain't gonna kill her. I'ma learn you how to be a daddy's son." Kurama's eyes widened. "If I could find a way to make her safe to be alive, I would be her father. But she isn't safe. I can't allow her to live. Nana deserves to live as well, so I will destroy Mariko if I have to. She ain't safe now, but she will be. I'ma make you a daddy boy," Killer Bee exclaimed. Kurama shook his head. "This ideology won't do anything to help my cause. If I have to, I will do it myself. Sorry for troubling you, B-san," Kurama said, turning to leave. "Family means no one gets left behind or forgotten." His voice had changed from that of a lower-class gangster to a man who has had to struggle. His voice was filled with strife and pain. Kurama turned around. "I'ma do it for free. I'ma save both those tricks and you gonna be happy. I put that shit on my life," Killer Bee shouted. He disappeared, leaving a very confused, yet satisfied Kurama in the sand. "What do you mean they were killed in a car accident?" Koutra asked. Tears streamed down his face. He had just watched his family get to shreds, and yet he couldn't remember who had done it. He was too hurt to remember. Too broken. Too lost. Now the chief of police was trying to tell him it was some kind of car accident. Bullshit. He was on a train with Kanae. She was torn apart along with their father. Why didn't it happen to him as well? He didn't want to remember. He wanted it to go away. Get the pictures out of his head. "I'm sorry, Koutra. That's what happened," the chief said. Koutra's hair fell over his eyes. The man was lying. Why was he lying? What was he hiding? Who does he think he's messing with? How would the chief of police feel if his family was torn to shreds? That's what he'd do. He'd let the fat man know what it felt like to lose something precious. He'd hurt him. Kill everything he ever cared about. Light his home aflame. Kill his children. String his wife up in a. What was wrong with him? Why was he thinking these perverted thoughts? "I'm so sorry, Koutra." Why was he sorry? What did he do to Koutra? Was it him? Did the fat man kill his family? Koutra began to sob. His body huffed, attempting to regain his oxygen as he quickly released more. Tears fell from his face as he tried to wipe them from his face. Snot ran out from his nose and he began to shake. "Is there anyone you know of who can stay with you?" the policeman asked, placing his hand on Koutra's back. Why was this murderer touching his disgusting fingers caressed his back. It sent shivers down the young boy's spine. How dare he touch him? How dare he breathe the same air as him? Who gave this bastard permission to be in his sight? Who gave this pig the idea that getting near him was a good idea? How dare he? How dare he? How dare he? Koutra jumped out of his sitting position and latched onto the large man and bit the fat at his neck. He tore with all his force before the man could even respond. Blood squirted out of the man's neck, whose scream soon left his lips. 3 cops came flooding into the room, pulling Koutra off of the man. Koutra struggled with all of his might, but was unable to break their grip. Two police officers held the boy down on his belly, rubbing his face into the carpet as a third one went to check on his partner. "Are you all right, Manana?" "Fuck no. The little bastard bit me," Manana screeched. More officers and even desk workers came to see the commotion. Hey. Where is this laughter coming from? Ha 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 ha. The police officers looked down at Koutra. Ha 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 ha. Gasp. He gasped. He was then racked with sobbing. "Is it me? Get off of me, Ko." Ta began to thrash as another officer was forced to hop onto him. Ha 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 ha. Gasp. "Get off of me, I'll kill all of you." "What the hell is wrong with him?" someone asked. "Give me back my Ni-chan. Give me back my Tou-san. I want them back." "Kid, I'm sorry, but your fammy." "Shut you. Ah, get away from me." They pushed down harder to keep him restrained. While they held him down, a medic came to check up on the injured officer. Koutra looked around erratically as he saw the wall move. Get off. The wall began to morph. Kanae. There was his young little sister, crawling out of the wall. There was only half of her. Whatidow Quote, "Get off, please." He was desperate. Thrashing was all he was capable of as tears started to truly rush down his face. What was he supposed to do? What did she want with him? Kanae began to crawl closer and closer. It was becoming unbearable. "I'm sorry. Please get off of me. Not until you calm down. I love you by GBROTH. Quote, "Get off. Before she gets me." They ignored him. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. Her voice was back to normal, but Koutra knew something was up. Koutra shook his head vigorously. "Then why did you leave me to die? What's happening?" "Calm down, kid. This is all your fault." The skin on her body dissolved. Away and maggots infected her bare flesh. Blood covered the room and everyone was smothered. How did they not notice? Just open up, Koutra," the nurse asked. She was specifically asked to rehabilitate Koutra. So far nothing she had done was working. They were in a psychiatric hospital. Koutra seemed to be suffering from an advanced form of schizophrenia. The medicine she had been giving him seemed to have no effect. In fact, his symptoms began to steadily increase in ferocity. Koutra's face jerked away from the spoon as the eyeball on it bore into his soul. It was mocking him. They were mocking him. They wouldn't be able to make him eat it. No matter what, he wouldn't eat it. That's what the damn thing wanted to do to him. It wanted to be ingested. It wanted to lurk around inside of him, forever stalking high from his stomach. It would keep him awake at night, always reminding him of how weak he was. Weak enough to eat a human eyeball just because he was hungry. He wouldn't do it. "Please, Koutra-san, I just want to help," the nurse begged. Koutra knew better. She was working with the pigs. They wanted to hurt him. They wanted to make him suffer. He wouldn't give them what they wanted. "If you don't eat, you could get sick, all right?" the nurse asked. He wouldn't reply with words. If he risked it, he knew that she would take advantage of him. His lips were sealed. Her hand found its way to his back as she brought herself close to him in hopes of soothing him. Koutra stiffened, but oddly found the whole thing comforting. "I promise, I won't hurt you," she whispered soothingly. Koutra's body relaxed beside her. Why did he feel so safe around her? Wasn't she working for those pigs? Was she different? Her hand went into his hair as she began to stroke his head softly. "I won't hurt you." She reached over with her other hand and grabbed the spoon. Koutra looked over at the spoon. It was covered in rice. "Eat up, Koutra-san." He opened his mouth as he relished in the flavor of rice. It was weird. He never thought rice could ever taste so divine. He chalked it up to the fact he hadn't eaten in days. Why was she being so nice to him? "See, Koutra-san, you don't have to worry anymore. I won't let anyone hurt you." She brought him in closer to her than he was. Already, Koutra, although incredibly close, finally got a good look at the nurse. The girl had deep dark black hair. She was attractively thin and her eyes reminded him of someone. They were purple like his sister's. She wore a pink nurse dress coupled with the hat you typically would find on a nurse's head. Oni-chan. Oni-chan. Who's that? Koutra asked. He was pointing at a young girl around his age. The girl had deep green hair and a blush on her face. All of the other kids in the hospital were playing. The only reason why he didn't was because he didn't want to stop holding highs, didn't mind either. She didn't really have family outside of the hospital, so she enjoyed spending time with her new little brother. Her name is Aki-chan. You should go and say hi, Koutra-kun, she said enthusiastically. Koutra looked nervous about it, but nodded his head reluctantly. He didn't want to make Oni-chan angry at him. He headed over the Aki, who sat on her lonesome. Maybe they didn't play with her because of her hair. Hi. Koutra introduced himself nervously. The small girl flinched, turning in Koutra's in a jerking motion. She looked petrified. It was as if she had seen a ghost. My name is Koutra. He tried to sound enthusiastic, but it was hard because he hadn't really talked to anyone besides her Oni-chan since the pigs put him in this place in the first place. My NNNNNN na NNNNNNNAAAAAAME is AA. IIIISAAA. IIIMAAA Aki. If one looked past the stuttering, you would notice she had a very pleasant voice. Do you want to play? Koutra asked. I. She nodded her head furiously. It had been 3 weeks since he and Koutra met and they had become good friends. It seemed Aki had developed a crush on the young Koutra. Koutra still spent as much time as he possibly could with his Oni-chan, but he was no longer afraid to stray away from her as much. Tag you it, Koutra said, running away from Aki. She wasn't very fast and she was incredibly frail, so he made sure to be exceptionally careful when around her, and D always went easy on her when they played tag, like right now. He was running as slowly as his excited body would allow without letting Aki think he was pitying her. She didn't seem to like being pitied, although the way she was made very hard not to. Aki tripped over, falling on her face. Koutra stopped what he was doing and went to go and help her. She was crying now and he didn't have a clue what to do. His Oni-chan was going to go over and see what was up when Koutra decided to do something completely out of his character. He brought her close to him and hugged. It's all right, Aki-chan, I won't let anything hurt you. Koutra jumped out of bed in surprise. Cold sweat ran down his face. Why was this happening to him? No use crying over a bad dream, however. He had things to do today. Well, from what Koutra could tell so far, he seemed to be in quite the pickle. What is the name of this pickle, one might ask? It went by the name of Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki. Today was a day for cleaning. So why wasn't Naruto cleaning? He found a chair, and when an animal finds something interesting, it explores. With what, one may ask? Their mouths. Currently Naruto was chewing the leg off of said furniture. The tortured item was covered in bite marks and saliva. Bits of wood was scattered on the ground as he noticed his cousin had the most horrified look on her face. It was as if she'd never seen anything like this beforehand. In all likelihood she probably had actually never seen a young teenage boy chew the crap out of a chair in her entire life. Which was understandable. She had never had a dog in all information. She had on boys' wear from when they were still kids and they hung out every once in a while. Hands covered her mouth as she watched the monster completely ruin the furniture in front of her. It seemed she was completely incapable of speech at this point. Koutra headed into the kitchen and grabbed a spray bottle and headed back into the vicinity of Naruto and Yuka. He aimed the bottle at Naruto and sprayed the young Jinchuriki in the face and watched in fascination as Naruto's face cringed away from the water as he made an attempt at protecting himself. His visual response to the immediate physical feedback was the same reaction one would have when faced with a bomb in their face that had just detonated. Naruto coughed and rubbed his face into tea. He carpet in a desperate attempt to rid his face of the liquid that had interrupted his exploration of the house. What the hell's your problem, Koutra? Naruto screeched, his face in the carpet. No chewing on the furniture, Naruto. Koutra said simply. He gave the relieved Yuka the spray bottle and left the room to see what the rest of the house was up to. Mayu was playing with her dog. The wood and floor had already been scrubbed, so it seemed she was taking a well-disturbed break. He would allow it. He was a nice guy like that. And he loved dogs. He then went to go and see what Nana was up to. He was greeted with a bloody-faced Nana and a broken window. It seemed that she tried to clean the window and failed miserably. How do you fail to clean a window? He just sighed. However, it seemed at his two new residents were completely useless in the sense of being incapable of functioning in this symbiotic relationship that was occurring with all other members of the house. They would need to be trained. Nana seemed like it would be simple enough for her to teach. She was young and seemed somewhat open-minded, but Naruto was another case entirely. Training him would require tact. It would require patience. Training Naruto, to an extent, would be the equivalent to training a fully grown bear how to ride a bike after just now abducting it from the wild. It had free will and knew what it was like to be free. So it was unlikely to respond to any form of stimulus besides food. Problem solved. Koutra, he pooped in the living room. He would need to act quickly. Itachi-kun, can you come here for a moment? Orochimaru asked his subordinate. Hi Orochimaru-sama, Itachi replied monotonously. They were in a lab room, or some form of one. It showed all the characteristics that could be described as a lab room. Except there was something else. It had a table placed in the center of the blank white room. A man was laid out atop the table, leaving him exposed due to the lack of clothing. He attempted to scream in pain as Orochimaru stood over him, cutting into his stomach. The man his neck fastened to the table so as to not be able to see anywhere but up. Cloth had been FFED in his mouth so his screams couldn't truly amplify past a certain decibel. He was hooked up to a fluid machine, filled with drugs. They were designed to keep the man from bleeding out. The only thing the poor guy could comprehend was pain. What do we know of Mariko-chan currently? Orochimaru asked. MMMMMFFFF. The man shrieked through his gagger. Oh hush, you're perfectly fine. Orochimaru peeled the skin back to much better get a visual of the man's muscle. It seemed normal enough to the so-called scientist. She is currently under the supervision of the spy known as Shirakawa. Itachi said plainly. As I thought. Orochimaru said simply. Orochimaru pulled a vial out of his back pocket, filled with purple liquid. He dropped a small amount of the stuff onto the monk's exposed muscle. MMMMMMMMMMFFFFFFFFF. Hush, you're not being a very cooperative test subject now, are you? The muscle began to fizzle and expand, reacting to the chemical almost immediately. The only readily on the man could give was the clenching of his hands and the muffled howls that reverberated throughout the room. It began to bulge and release a horrid purple gas. It floated into the air before dissolving into nothing. The man was incapable of noise at this point. The pain was too much for his brain to handle. People are fickle, wouldn't you agree, Itachi-kun? Orochimaru asked. Hi, we always want to say we're better than animals. But when push comes to shove, we behave in the exact same manner. For instance, I offered this man the choice not to go through this process, as he knew he would. The man stopped breathing as his eyes rolled into the back of his head. I asked him to give me his daughter. He didn't even hesitate. Knowing what was to come, he decided that to cut his losses and give up his daughter. Of course not one to give up on valuable research material. I'm currently using her in my breeding stock. I highly doubt she will survive the first pregnancy because she is much too young to handle the nutrient distribution into a matress, but I digress. I'm more interested in her father's decision. Male animals, when confronted with challenges that they don't believe they can confront, will cut their losses. Now this isn't a front on the animal kingdom. I have witnessed many times both human and animal defending their young no matter the cost. But those are in the minority. Is there a possible gene that exhibits this behavioral response? Or is it conditioning? This I don't truly understand. Orochimaru looked at the corpse in front of him. What a waste. I had many more tests for him. He could have been of some use. Orochimaru said, surprisingly disappointedly. Kabuto-kun, bring me the man's daughter. I believe she has yet to be inseminated. I would like to do it personally. Hi Orochimaru-sama, Kabuto replied back. Shuffling could be heard down the halls. Is there something you need, Itachi-kun? No, Orochimaru-sama. Well, that's not any fun now, is it? How about you stay and watch the insemination? I believe it could be beneficial to you. Orochimaru said joyfully. It was quite sickening to see someone take such joy in this barbaric practice. But his opinion would remain his own for the time being. "Here's Nazomi-chan Orochimaru-sama," Kabuto said excitedly. There stood a young girl, seeming to be 15 years of age, shivering. Shish. He had long black hair and nothing but a t-shirt on. It was clear that she had wet herself quite a number of times while in containment if the stains on her shirt were any indication. She was still in tears at the thought of what could possibly happen to her. Orochimaru walked up to her, very unlike a predator. There was no indication of what he was thinking. It was almost unnatural. The girl stiffened. Itachi could smell the stench of fear on her. Every instinct he had told him to protect her, but he didn't fight off of instincts. You fought off of more tangible things like statistics and correlation. You fought through the use of strategy and logic. To not do so would be foolish. My, what a beautiful subject. Nazomi is it. She didn't respond. It's all right to be nervous. It makes my job all the easier. His hand reached out and formed into snakes, surrounding the young girl. She thrashed in an attempt to escape as the makeshift snake hand took her toward the operating table. "Let's begin, shall we?" He forced her upon the table and the straps held her in place. Flee mph. She was gagged before she could give any form of retort. In a last-ditch effort for freedom, he pulled herself, attempting to free herself of her binds, only to look a certain man in the eye. Itachi's heart stopped on a dime. That expression. "Sasuke. No more attempts like that, missy," Orochimaru said happily, almost as if it were a joke. He strapped her neck to the table so couldn't move any longer. She was now completely immobilized. "I have to do something," Itachi thought. There was no way he would be able to remove her from the situation without risking both of their lives, so he had to find some alternative. Illusionary art. Feeding Baku. Nazomi passed out immediately. I knew her body was weak, but I guess it was much weaker than I had originally surmised. Orochimaru said simply. He would just have to inseminate while she was asleep. No fun, but not the point. She was floating. Nothing could hold her down at this point. Did she die? "You're not dead. Who's there?" Nazomi stuttered out. She looked around, in hopes of finding the source of noise. There was nobody around her. It was just a void of nothing. "This is an illusion, designed to protect you," the voice said simply. She had no response, until a man materialized right in front of her. The man from earlier. She stood across from him. She was now terrified once again. She began to shake uncontrollably. She wanted to plead with him, get him to stop whatever he was doing. She just wanted to go home. Tears came to her eyes as she fell to her knees. She didn't want this. Not anymore. She was tired and she was scared. Scared of what was going to be done to her. They had already done horrible things to her. She had already been assaulted by the guards. They had their way with her and all she could do was cry. It would happen again. She knew it. "Are you all right?" Itachi asked, taking a step forward. She flinched away from him, scared of what was to be done to her. He winced at her response. "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you," he said with sincerity. It had been a while since he had spoken with emotion. He was always trained to speak with no emotion. Act as if he didn't care. But then the expression she had on her face. It was the one he remembered Sasuke had. The one he had before he had passed away. "I promise you're safe. Leave me alone." She stuttered through sobs. "I'm going to get you out of here," Itachi said bluntly, hoping his words would calm her down. She froze again. She didn't completely comprehend the words that had left his mouth. Now he was in quite the situation. If he made an attempt at escaping and Orochimaru figured out, he was dead. There was no one way or the other. It was simple. He would have to be smart. As long as he thought it though, it should work out fine. He was then tackled into a hug. He hoped for not only her sake, but his own, that they made it out alive. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.